When I opened my eyes, everything was dark. It was like the start of a film at the cinema before the picture has begun, when the blank frames are just flashing up without any sound. Those are the haunting words of Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a ship designer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Just imagine that for a second. Try to put yourself in his shoes. The absolute sensory deprivation, the sheer paralyzing terror of that first atomic flash. A blinding light that literally steals the world from your eyes, followed by a silent, dreadful anticipation of what's coming next. Section 1. The First Flash. August 6th, 1945. Our timeline begins on a clear, seemingly ordinary morning that violently altered the course of human history. To put this in perspective, the vast majority of the bomb's devastating energy radiated from a spark barely wider than the tip of your index finger, deep inside a compressing core of uranium. It was a terrifyingly small atomic reaction born of the weak nuclear force. But within a fraction of a second, that tiny spark swelled into an 80-meter golden-white plasmasphere. It shot fragments of atomic nuclei toward the ground at nearly the speed of light. And up above the city, it formed a massive, ominous black cloud. One survivor actually described it as a decapitated dragon growing a new head. Just colossal, world-ending physical devastation unleashed straight from the sky. Now, let's bring this down to the human scale. Take a young accountant named Kenshi Hirata. He was working at the Mitsubishi weapons plant a little over 4 kilometers from the hypocenter. Suddenly, flashing through his window, came the most beautiful golden lightning he had ever seen, immediately followed by an inner voice screaming at him to take cover. He dove straight to the floor, and seconds later, the blast wave hit. By the time the window panes traveled even a half meter, they had ripped completely free from their air raid tape, turning into thousands of tiny shards of supersonic glass that just absolutely shredded the room and, tragically, his colleagues. Pure instinct is the only reason Kenshi survived. After the blast, Kenshi had to navigate a surreal, apocalyptic wasteland just to find his bride, Setsuko. The landscape of Ground Zero completely defied reality. He saw what looked like ground candles, literal jets of flame the size and shape of donuts just flickering out of the streets. He walked past charred figures sitting carbonized in their seats on streetcars, completely indistinguishable from humans or animals. The city experienced a 20-block-wide shock bubble collapse. That vacuum effect created these giant updrafts, pulling shattered buildings, bicycles, and even a heavy piano right up into the black, radioactive cloud. The city wasn't just destroyed, it was completely flat. Section 2. The Last Train. Out in the ashes, a desperate, agonizing escape was beginning. With the entire city in ruins, anyone who could still walk sought any possible way to flee the burning, radioactive embers of Hiroshima. 300. I want to let the heavy weight of that specific number sink in for a moment. Out of a whole city, only about 300 people managed to board the last 2 fleeing trains out of Hiroshima. These were survivors who had quite literally just lived through the apocalypse. They were carrying terrible physical and emotional scars, desperately seeking the safety of their hometowns, their families, or honestly just anywhere that wasn't Ground Zero. Let's trace their route, because the tragic irony here is almost unbelievable. On August 6th, they endure that horrific first atomic flash in Hiroshima. Through August 7th and 8th, they're on a desperate, agonizing train journey away from the ashes, heading southwest. And then, on the morning of August 9th, they arrive in Nagasaki. They had barely escaped the first nuclear fire, only to ride directly into a second nuclear crosshair. It's the kind of timeline that's just profoundly difficult to fathom. As one of the survivors later put it is never good to be the second of anything. It's a haunting thought, right? History has this unfortunate tendency to forget the second strike. The devastation of the Nagasaki bomb often sits quietly in the immense shadow of Hiroshima. But for those people on that train, the nightmare was about to repeat itself, this time with an even more powerful weapon. Section 3. The Second Ground Zero. On the morning of August 9th, 90% of the 300 Hiroshima train passengers who miraculously escaped that first blast and made it to Nagasaki, approximately 90% of them were killed by the second atomic bomb. The sheer mathematical cruelty of that statistic, it just demands our absolute sobering stillness. Out of this unfathomable crucible, a new term was born, Niju Hibakusha. This designates the double bomb-affected people. It's that infinitesimal fraction of human beings who somehow, miraculously, survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic blasts. They bore the unprecedented physical trauma of extreme radiation, alongside the deep emotional scars of witnessing two suns igniting on Earth, back to back. Section 4. The Silent Witnesses. The heartbreaking truth is, surviving the blasts was really only the beginning. For these people, the story quickly shifted from the immediate horrors of the explosions to literally decades of hidden suffering. The Niju Hibakusha were enduring radiation illness, profound psychological trauma, and immense societal struggles. And yet, they were forced to live in absolute silence. You see, from September 1945 to April 1942, the occupation forces enforced a strict press code. This meant absolute, sweeping censorship. Any domestic reporting, scientific publications, or even artistic depictions of the atomic bombings were strictly embargoed. Their physical agony was kept entirely hidden from the rest of the world. Even after that censorship finally lifted, the struggle just shifted over to a bureaucratic nightmare. It wasn't until 1957 that the Japanese parliament passed the Atomic Bomb Survivors Relief Law, and victims had to legally prove their trauma through incredibly strict criteria. You had to prove physical presence within a few kilometers of the hypocenter, or entry within 2 kilometers within 2 weeks, or direct exposure to radioactive fallout, or that you were in utero during the exposure. It was a slow, rigid, agonizing framework, and only upon successfully navigating all of that red tape could a survivor receive a pale violet health handbook that granted them government checkups and modest allowances. That strict, unforgiving bureaucracy resulted in a singular, devastating reality. 1. Because of how incredibly few came forward and the insanely rigid nature of the legal frameworks, as of 2009, Tsutomu Yamaguchi was the sole person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both bombs. Just one man, standing as the official testament to a dual apocalypse. Section 5. A Legacy of Peace. From the absolute depths of that hidden suffering, these silent witnesses eventually found their voice, and they changed the world. Starting from the establishment of legal recognition back in 1957, the survivors slowly transformed from hidden victims into global anti-nuclear activists. Remember Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the man who remembered the blank, flashing film frames of the first bomb? In 2006, he stood before the United Nations to passionately plead for disarmament. And their relentless advocacy helped pave the way all the way to 2017, when the historic Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons officially opened for signature. Preserving this historical record has been absolutely crucial. Publications like the Asia-Pacific Journal have helped meticulously document the precise mechanics of their survival, the hard clinical realities of their suffering, and their fierce resistance to bureaucratic erasure. By doing this, these survivors created an indelible historical archive. They ensured once and for all that the horrific reality of nuclear weapons could not be sanitized, denied, or forgotten by future generations. So we're going to conclude this explainer with a question, one that deeply echoes into our present moment. As the painful memories of the Niju Hibakusha slowly fade into history, how will their unprecedented survival continue to challenge the geopolitical logic of nuclear deterrence today? The men and women who miraculously survived the double ground zero have given us the ultimate, final warning. It's up to us now to ensure that their lived nightmare remains a historical record and never, ever becomes our future.